Welcome on into the Colorado Prep Show presented by UPSWING. I'm the editor-in-chief of Colorado Prep's Dan Mohrmann. We've got a fun post-Labor Day, post-Week 1 football session. With me so far, as always, is the esteemed editor of Mile High Sports Magazine, Doug Ottewill. Doug, what's new in the world of maybe not just high school sports, but all of Colorado sports in general?
Hey, I'm refreshed, coming off a 3-day weekend. We got a whole Saturday of football and college front and getting ready for Broncos. I mean, we got a new magazine coming out. I mean, this is go time. This is what we live for here in the fall.
That's right. And we've convened what's pretty much an editorial board as we bring in the co-editor of bocopreps.com, Brent New, a former Mile High sports guy himself. Brent, holidays are great for us preps guys in theory, but do you have a solid 3-day weekend post or maybe 1-day weekend post Week 1 of high school football?
No, I got out and it was good, but just football through Saturday and then back at it Monday, but no, it was nice to have the 1-day break at least.
Awesome. Well, guys, as Doug mentioned, it is here. We have the brand new issue of Mile High Sports Magazine. As if I can just get it a little more centered in the screen, it is available now. You can get one of two outstanding covers, either Broncos starting quarterback Bo Nix or NFL Defensive Player of the Year Pat Surtain. Make sure you check out the Mile High Sports Staff Roundtable Broncos preview. We have a very visual-friendly look at college football. And, of course, we've got the Prep Stars presented by our friends at UPSWING. We looked at 18 high school football players that we expect big things out of. Brent, we had the Boco guys covered. We had representation from Broomfield, Fairview, and Legacy. Great spread, great insight. If you're not sure where to check it out, you can find it at milehighsports.com/magazine. I actually had University baseball coach Casey Miller. I posted the Bo Nix cover on Friday when we were all up at number 38. And Casey shot me a message and said, my kid is a massive Bo Nix fan. I need one of those magazines. So when we get done here, I gotta mail some out to our friend Casey up there. But speaking of our friends at UPSWING, as we start off every show, we got to look at what's on the upswing in the world of high school sports. Brent New, you are the newcomer to the program. So why don't you go ahead and give us what's on your mind? What's trending upwards for high school sports and high school football?
Well, I'll tell you guys, the freshman running back at Broomfield, obviously on the upswing. His name is Cassius Clarvo, and guys, this guy is spectacular. I saw him on Friday in Week 1, his first high school game. As a freshman, all he does is score 3 touchdowns, has a 95-yard kick return that nobody, I think, touched him. He's so good that the coach, when maybe you're looking for a Hail Mary or just running out the clock at the end of the first half, the coach of Broomfield, Robert O'Brien, he promises me that he's handing the ball off, not to run out the clock, but that's their Hail Mary because he thinks that the kid's going to score every time. So I don't want to put too much pressure on the freshmen and compare him to the likes of your great Colorado running backs like your McCaffreys and old Kalen Balaj, back at Falcon. But I don't know. This kid's terrific, and I think he's going to have a star career at Broomfield and on.
I mean, that's got to sit well. I know that they're featuring a brand new starting quarterback in Matthew Merlett. It's nice to have sort of that quarterback's best friend when you can hand the ball off and anything can happen at any given moment when he's getting his feet wet too.
Oh, definitely. And, Merlett, I mean, here's a kid and taking over, and they're playing freshman on Friday, and credit to, they're playing Frederick on Friday, and credit to Frederick. I mean, their defense looked good. I mean, Broomfield has this huge line, but they were getting after Matthew a little bit early on, caused a fumble on the first drive, but then, he comes back, they settle in with the run, and he makes some, real good throws, throughout the game. So, it always helps to hand the ball off and, have a kid that, might go for 80 yards and a touchdown every time. That helps.
We're gonna dive into more of the 4A football landscape. Of course, Broomfield, the defending 4A state champions, and giving a solid showing in Week 1. In my mind, Brent, I'm actually sticking with the area the Boco Preps covers. I made my way down to Dutch Clark Stadium on Thursday and saw last year's state runner-up in Meade. And man, they look big, they look physical, they look every bit the team that has every intention of making it back to the 3A state title game. But the big takeaway over the weekend was the fact that the top that top tier of 3A football teams looks like this could be such a fun season with them. I mean, Windsor just looked outstanding in a week 1 win over Green Mountain. Pomona has looked strong early in the season. And when you add in defending champion Thompson Valley, who brings back a lot of that state championship team, the 3A landscape, I mean, it's week 1 and we're always ready to make way too early predictions, but the 3A semifinals are making for what could be the most fun weekend of high school football. And we're talking about something that's happening in late November. So that's what's on my upswing. And I can't wait to dive into that with you guys. Doug, what caught your eye?
Well, I tell you what, Dan, you make a good point. The team that looked the very best in white and burnt orange this weekend was Meade. Just, in case you caught a little college football on Saturday morning. But I'm going to go down to Eastern Colorado. And, in week 1, CSCS pull off a pretty big upset over then ranked number 2 Holyoke. And everybody's talking about, hey, maybe we got a new team in 1A football that could make some noise. And I'm not counting CSCS out by any means, but they got to go play Lyman at Lyman this last weekend. And Lyman promptly reminded them who the class of Class 1A typically is by beating them 41-14. And that's not to say that Colorado Springs Christian can't come back or won't come back. They probably will. But I looked over and looked at the scores over the weekend coming in. Ray looked good. They put a thumping on Platte Canyon, 47-12. And it just kind of reminds you when you start going out into those, smaller classifications, those programs that are there year in, year out, they're there year in, year out. And I think, obviously it's just week 1, so I don't want to make too many conclusions, but, Lyman and Ray are going to be the teams to beat, as is typically the case.
That's awesome. We're going to dive again more into the 1A landscape, but before we bring in our friend Jermaine Stafford from Upswing, we want to tell you a little bit more about Upswing, located at 7460 South University Boulevard, right across the street from Arapahoe High School. One of the first things you notice when you walk into Upswing, and Doug, you can attest to this, their dedication to recovery. I mean, their cold plunge sauna and compression therapy are all designed to help kids and youth athletes train safely and perform at their best. When we were doing our photo shoot for Mile High Sports Magazine, Jermaine even loaded up the kids with Normatec compression leggings while they were waiting. Just it was such an awesome sight to see. I use Normatec compression leggings for my recovery. Awesome piece of equipment. Highly encourage it. When it comes to kids, Upswing removes cost barriers so that young athletes can access world-class training and recovery, and they provide youth athletes with all the tools, mentorship, and belief they need to reach the next level. You can learn more at upswingfoundation.org. And with that, we're going to go out. I hope he made it through I-70 traffic. He gave me a call. He was stuck on I-70, and there he is, our guy Jermaine Stafford, the face of Upswing, as he likes to call himself. Jermaine, how was you were texting me from some high school football games over the weekend. How was your viewing experience with these kids?
Well, thanks for having me. And I made it through that I-70 traffic. It was tough. Yeah, this weekend was great. As you can see, I have on the sunglasses because the bright 5A football outlook that they have going on right now. It was awesome to watch Grandview battle Legend. Also over to Arapahoe with Mountain Vista. That was a great game, watching that one close up sideline. So yeah, some great football out there today. I've seen some interesting battles and some unique individuals. Obviously in the social world, watching old Cash. I like to call it the North Side Cash because you have the South Side Cash with Cash down in Valor. But the North Side Cash up in Broomfield, watching that young man get away, watching his feet will make you dizzy. He definitely very elusive.
Well, we're going to start a little bit because I was so enthralled by what I saw from the 3A landscape in terms of what we saw out of Meade, Windsor, Pomona with another win. Thompson Valley's looking good. So, guys, it is just week one, but the 3A landscape looks to be a little bit of there's some really good parity in that upper block. I mean, I want to highlight Meade's running attack a little bit, and I was able to snag some videos of their first couple touchdowns against Pueblo South. I mean, Griffin Cradaville, their big running back. This kid would be a fullback for most 5A teams, but I want you to keep your eye on right tackle James Bennett, or I mentioned this on Mile High Sports Today on Friday when I was on with Nate Lundy. James Bennett is no longer known as James Bennett for Colorado Prep's purposes. We will only refer to him as Big Jim. And Big Jim just leads that rushing attack. He's a sophomore. He stands 6'7", 275. If they run that ball to the right side of the line, they're going to gain yards simply because he is the biggest kid on the field. Brent, you're going to see a lot of Meade this year. What do we think is going on with the Mavericks? I mean, this looks very much like a Jason Clack coach team.
Oh, definitely. And, they're going to have the same identity, more or less, I would assume, as they did last year. I mean, they want to run the ball. They want their quarterback to throw maybe 10, maybe 15 times per game in really effective throws. But I'll say this, the Mavs last year rolled through the regular season and they're averaging about, 6 yards per carry. No one could really stop them, running the ball. And then you hit your Pomonas, and then of course you hit Thompson Valley in the championship game, and that was down to about 3.7 yards per carry. They just they couldn't run it as well. So a heck of a start, with Big Jim and the Mavs. But I'll be curious to see when the competition, when they face Pomona, Thompson Valley, Windsor. I'll be interested to see if that running attack still is thriving.
Doug, you were up at Canvas Stadium last year. That was such a defensive-minded game between Thompson Valley and Meade. If you have a guy who can kind of set that offensive edge, like Big Jim, and you have that push, is that something that can make a difference as that kid develops from a freshman into a sophomore year?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the name of the game, especially, we see and we have seen so far this year some really high-flying offenses, Legend, Mountain Vista, or whatever, in the 5A class. When you drop down a couple classes, if you can run the ball, if you can run the clock, I think you have a chance to win in any given game. And Meade showed that they were that team last year. That game, that championship game, it was a strange game because score aside, it really could have gone either way. There were some big plays at the end of the first half. There were some turnovers that were kind of untimely. That game really could have been anyone's. And I think that the matchup between those two teams going into this year should be great again. But yeah, I think you have a team like Meade that can run and run dominantly. And look, it's not that they can't pass. It's just that they just run the ball so well. And obviously it starts with that line, but I mean, they look to be the team to beat as of right now. They just look so big, so physical. It's hard to imagine them really not being able to beat anybody in the state.
We'll stay in the 3A ranks. Jermaine, you jumped into the voting pool for our Colorado Preps football rankings each week, and the one thing that caught my eye is after what Windsor did to Green Mountain, you have the Wizards as your number one team in 3A. What did you see out of Windsor that has you thinking that they're the team to beat early in the season?
It's that dominance, right? If you look at the 5A football, we look at Cherry Creek every year. It's like, how can they be dominant? What you seen Windsor put on with a high-ranked team in Green Mountain, the way they dominated every phase of the game, special teams, the line of scrimmage, they were tackling, they were very aggressive. We just alluded to it. Anytime you can run the ball and just push at that level of football, you're going to win. You're not asking for timing plays versus you're asking for guys to be tough. The narrative is a push. It's easy to fall into that type of agenda when a coach has those type of players. And Windsor is strong. They just look strong. And I am a Lutheran track and field coach. So I've seen them over the years. I've seen that area, and I know what they do in regards to coming with a different type of athletes they can bring to the table. I do see that victory putting them as number one. I truly do.
And that's again, that top four. And you can't forget about teams that have been dominant in 3A in recent years. You have your Roosevelts, you have your Holy Families. I mean, this is going to be a very competitive year across that landscape. So I'm really excited to see to see how some of those play out. We can move over to 4A. I mean, Brent, Broomfield was probably the highlight of that classification for the week, just in terms of what they were able to do with a freshman running back. You were at that game, so and we touched on it a little bit, but for those of us who see a score and see a few tweets from you, what do we not understand about what the Eagles are going to look like in 2025?
Well, the scary thing is, I think if Coach O'Brien's probably being honest, I don't think they played all that good, and lot of mistakes, penalties, some silly penalties, and still, with 1 minute left in the game. I mean, this thing was 31-6, and so this team's only going to get better. The freshmen, took the spotlight, but they have. Their defense, again, is high flying. They're going to make plays. And that offensive line, as we're talking about offensive lines, I mean, an average size, and I wrote a story about this, an average size of like 6'7". I mean, they're huge. And I don't know of a team in 4A that's going to be able to handle that offensive line. I mean, even their tight end, Caleb Dunn, who's going to Air Force. I mean, he's 6'7". He didn't have a huge mark in that game, but he's going to at some point. And the quarterback, Merlat, he's just going to keep getting better. He's got a nice arm. He has a nice presence in the pocket. So this team, and then you add, the freshman running back who's just, he's going to make something spectacular every week. It's hard to imagine who can beat Broomfield.
Yeah. Doug, you mentioned a big offensive line when you get into those lower classes is crucial to help run. But Broomfield is a team that's been able to do it on the ground and through the air in recent years. I mean, I think back to Cole LaCrue when they won. I think back that was the last state championship game for 4A at Mile High. They've always had a diversified offensive attack. So how helpful is that big offensive line when you can do both things, when you can throw the ball and when you're looking to run behind a stud freshman?
Well, I think it's everything, and especially when you mentioned Cole LaCrue, and that's just kind of quarterback high. I mean, it seems like every kid that steps in there does a good job, but Brent mentioned Matthew Merritt. He's a junior, so there's obvious talent there. But I think anytime that you ask an underclassman to come in and take over a state championship team, there's some bumps in the road. And to be able to play behind a line that size, it just adds all the comfortability of growing in that role. And I think that's what, Brent alluded to. You're going to see that team. They were a running team this week and they got a big play on special teams, but you're going to see that team become more balanced, much more like what we've come to know out of Broomfield. I think when you start talking about teams that run the ball effectively, you look at that state championship game from a year ago, and you look at this week's score, and Montrose is going to be right there again. But that's a team that's solely built on the run. I mean, that's sort of your, Air Force Falcons of Colorado 4A. I mean, they just run, and then right when you think they have to pass, they run again. I know you're familiar with that team, Dan, and I think that, not to get too far ahead, but, hypothetically, if those two teams meet up again in the postseason, they could just run could be about a 30-minute game. They could both just run the ball all game long and hope to come out on top. But, those lines are just impressive, and not just in size, but in skill and kind of cohesion and chemistry. Both of those teams are going to be really good in 4A.
And I'll get to Montrose in a second, but Jermaine, again, I'm going to go back to those football polls because I like that you're taking that perspective. You had Montrose as your number one in 4A. I'll preface that, I don't want to throw you under the bus, but you're the only voter that had them at number one. I think everyone's got a lot of faith in the defending state champions, but what do you like about Montrose? I like the double wing tee. I like the way that Brent Mertens does run the ball. I have some thoughts on them throwing here in a second, but what are you seeing out of the Red Hawks that has your faith in them a little bit higher than ours?
Well, other than the corn down in Delta, I mean, they do have a sweet offense, right? I mean, you look at it. And the reason why I put them number one is just like in college football. We see the teams every week. If you're 3-0, you're 2-0, that you get the higher ranking because of that. However, if you look at the chemistry of the teams and what they are brewing, if you look at Montrose, Doug just alluded to it. The running game will be the difference, right? The running game in that area will be the difference. I think they preserve themselves to become a better team later in the year because of the area they're located in. Here in Broomfield, I think the Broomfield team will have to rush the ball, but they will have to throw the ball, and it will show some not weaknesses necessarily, but it definitely will give some teams the opportunity to beat up on that line. You'll see more pirate blitzes coming from the defense, and that would expose. Montrose doesn't have to show a lot, right? They won't have to show as much. And I see Montrose being that number one team of how they run the ball. It's great to see both of these running backs being those scat type of backs behind those big lines, because if you're a big back and you're running downhill and you also have big line, you're going to run into each other a lot. These scat back type of way they run, Broomfield Cass's, his feet are always looking to be lateral and up the field. So with Montrose, it's the same concept. They have the opportunity to stay consistent and not show everything to the time where it comes to big games. And I see Montrose being that team. I truly feel that way. And I will vote on the narrative and not the record. At times I've seen Ponderosa, that was a loss, but that was a big loss to a big team. They ran into a buzzsaw. I still see them being a good team. One loss doesn't do it. I mean, we talk about the college ranks. You heard the team down there in Austin talk about, hey, there won't be one undefeated team in the national championship this year. You just may not see that. And so I think it's the same way it goes in the rankings of the high school football here in Colorado. Between 3 all the way up to 5A, you will see some losses that happen, but that's why they play playoffs.
And you'll probably have a little bit of a double-edged sword when it comes to that schedule with Broomfield. They're going to face Legacy. They're going to face Erie. So you're going to see some tough physical teams that can beat up that offensive line. It was funny. I chatted with Montrose coach Brent Mertens after their big win over Greeley Central on Friday, Doug. And the one thing that he told me was quarterback Kate Saunders threw the ball real nice, which just, he's a kid that Coach Mertens has been bragging to me about this kid for over a year. They liked Chris Mock last year. He was a veteran. He had a steady presence. So he knew what he was getting in his quarterback. He was excited about Saunders, who was a sophomore, got thrown into the mix in the playoffs when Mock got hurt. And this is a kid that can kind of add that element of taking the ball through the air when they need to. He had a great touchdown pass to Chase Meehan early in that win. I was able to catch a little bit of that on the NFHS network. Chase got behind. I mean, he's speedy. Chase is speedy. He got behind the defense, and Saunders hit him right in stride. So Montrose can throw the ball a little bit when the time calls for it, which should make for a lot of fun. I want to shift over to 6-man real quick, guys, and chat a little bit about Stratton and Cheyenne Wells. It's been the 2-man race as it comes to the 6-man ranks. Stratton won this was the state title game last year. For the last few years, they've opened up against each other. Stratton gets the win this week. Dating back to 2022, the only time that either of these teams lost has been to each other. And so is this a precursor for what we're going to see in the state championship game again? Can we sit there and say definitively after week 1, it's likely going to be Stratton and Cheyenne Wells, even though Eads is kind of a curious little team making an appearance there? Doug?
I've never had a reason to bet against Stratton. I mean, I can remember when Stratton was the class of 8-man football. And I think the fact that they, took one on the chin in the state championship game last year, bounced back, probably had a score to settle, so to speak, in week 1 and got even with Cheyenne Wells. It just sort of sets the stage for the rest of the season. It's always fun looking through those scores in 6-man football, and they are wild. I mean, they're just, they're track meets, but both of these teams have speed. Both of them have really good disciplined defense, which is really important in six-man football. You know, being able to stay home and not let that score get up into the 70s or 80s is critical. But yeah, both of these teams will be right back there. If not in the championship game, both will be in the semis for sure.
Brent, I know six-man is not as available in the BOCO area, but I think you had a little bit of time just to look at what these teams are going through. When you look at trends, you know, how much do you see football teams kind of carry trends over from year to year, especially like this, where you're in small communities and you're getting a lot of that, you know, we've called it peer pressure of I'm playing football, you're playing football. There's 12 of us in the school. Get out on the field.
Yeah, no, definitely. And probably covered more 8-man, 6-man when I was down at the Colorado Springs Gazette. But yeah, there's not too much up north, at least in the Boca area. But I will say this. I mean, that Stratton Cheyenne Wells game, I think the final was, 50-20 something. And that always seems like that's a huge margin. But I've learned in the 8-man and 6-man, I mean, that can be reverse the next week. I mean, it's just a matter of, as Doug was saying, they're just track meets, and you can put up, I mean, kind of like the old 2010 and stuff, Golden State Warriors. I mean, just in a minute, and they've just put up 20 points and stuff. So, I expect Stratton to be right there again, and Cheyenne Wells, and I don't think that even falling 50, I think it was 22. I think the next time they face Stratton, it could be the other way around. So that's just kind of 8-man, 6-man football.
Jermaine, Brent just said it. They're essentially track meets.
Yeah.
I don't know how much 6-man football you get to see through the course of the year or you watch, but when you hear the idea of basically kids getting into wide open space and being able to run freely as a track guy, how much does that make you want to check out these kind of games with these athletes that are just kind of doing everything?
I love it. I come from that background of 7-on-7 years ago when there was only 2 7-on-7 teams here in Colorado. We had Brian Dawkins as a part of ours, and we had the A and B, Narcy Jackson, there across the way, the tracks. But you see these teams with 7-on-7 type of mentalities and that track meet, they're just athletic. I mean, it's opportunity for kids in those areas to show they can play football as well. You put some linemen with them, and we're having conversations about a actual football team. So no, it's exciting. I'm looking forward to getting out and watching some. I'm actually heading out to a couple games this weekend because I want to be front and center to see some of those track meets. I love the speed. Obviously at Upswing, that's one thing we motivate ourselves to be great about is movement. So I'm looking forward to courtside to some of those Golden State games.
I would love to see some of those 6-man or 8-man kids get onto that track and work with you and see what you guys could really bring out in them. Guys, it was another big week in the 5A landscape. We've got some perennial top 10 teams that we may have some concerns over after 2 weeks, but Cherry Creek went down to Florida, got a win over Cardinal Mooney. That win gave Dave Logan 343. He now sits alone at number 2 all time in wins, which is a big deal for him. And I think the big one, and Jermaine, you were there. Mountain Vista comes away with a big win over Arapahoe. And guys, should we all have a little egg on our face, especially early in the season, for not having as much faith in Mountain Vista post Austin Majeski?
Well, I think when you have an offensive mind like Garrett Looney, you can expect that they will be a proficient offense. I don't know that we expected this when you lose the best quarterback, not just in the state last year, but probably in the state over the last several years. The kid was amazing. So you start to think, well, how much of that offense was having a dynamic quarterback versus Garrett Looney's X's and O's? And I think, maybe we're starting to see, hey, that's a really, really good scheme, a really good offense that Looney calls week in, week out. And I think the other part of that game, and I don't necessarily want to say egg on my face yet, but I think we all expected Arapahoe to have a really good defense. And it's hard to say when you're playing against a great team like that, but Arapahoe didn't put up any points. They had, the shutout. So you got to give some credit to Mountain Vista's defense, but also maybe bring some questions into, can Arapahoe play with the big boys if they can't move the ball, if they can't maintain possession? And I didn't see all that game. I saw some highlights, but that would be my concern with Arapahoe's. They do have a what should be a very good defense, but they may still be lacking on offense, which is, you can't go very far in 5A football when you only have one side of the ball performing.
And I think they go for the milk jug this week against Heritage. So good rivalry game, maybe get them back in the proper mindset. Jermaine, what did you see from both teams? Is Mountain Vista still kind of in that upper echelon of those 5A teams that they were last year? And is there really any reason to be worried about Arapahoe?
Well, Dan, thank you for not scrambling the egg on my face. Obviously, I was speaking about Arapahoe pretty highly, and I still stand highly about them. I mean, it's a football game. It's W's and L's. You're not going to win every one. It was 20-0 with some great defense played on both sides. I mean, Brody was just living in the backfield. I don't know his stats exactly, but I know it was 3+ sacks in the first half that we witnessed. What you see on the Mountain Vista side, Coach Looney has an offense that is very is explosive and is gifted. Chapri, the running back out of the backfield, is dangerous to deal with. That kid has pure speed. And then what you see on the other side is, the quarterback, they lost a top quarterback, but their quarterback controlled the game. They didn't put the ball in his hands to make any mistakes versus let's just control the line of scrimmage, just get first down after first down, and we will create some points for ourselves. They have some big plays on offense as well, a couple of deep passes that change the narrative of how the defense is playing on the Arapahoe side. But I don't believe there's a lot of concern for Arapahoe to going into this Heritage game. Just consistently stay the same process they have. Mountain Vista, very surprising for me. I will sit here and say I've seen that team come back. They can play with some of the top 5A football teams if they have that same type of game. And they actually lost their top player, Braylon, in the first half to, I think it was something, looks like a small, possibly concussion and things. But seeing that and see the team gather around him on the sideline and wanting to win that game, that Arapahoe game was pretty tough for them on the social side. I mean, that was last year one of the most talked about games beginning of the year. So to see them come back, Arapahoe will be in a great position this week with some chips on the shoulder. And I say chips because it's not just one. It's a rival game, and they have some comeback of what they need to accomplish to start their season on a positive note.
And we're gonna touch on the game you were at on Thursday here in a second. Another big top 10 game in 5A last week was Ralston Valley getting a big win over Erie. Brent, how does Jeff Geiger respond with his group?
And I talked to Geiger after, they blew out in week 0. They blew out Brighton 67-17, and obviously the competition went way up against Ralston Valley, and Erie's a team that's putting in a lot of new guys and starting roles, and so of course they have a guy like Braylon Tolliver, the Oregon State commit, who's just fantastic, and I was even asking him, he's a running back commit for Oregon State, but he might be even better as a defensive back, and they're also using him as a defensive end, which he got a few sacks against Brighton. But I will say they're a team that has a lot of youth, and that's going to have to grow as the season goes on. Obviously, Ralston Valley was just at a different level. I mean, after the first drive, that really I think they scored 34 straight points, so that really wasn't much of a game. But I would expect, just like they did last year, they lost to Ralston Valley, and then they ended up being in the 5A quarterfinals. They'll grow. Geiger's one of the best coaches in the game, so they'll keep getting better.
Probably one of the most exciting games last week. Jermaine, you and I were texting about it on Thursday because you were there, and Doug, I sent you a text telling you that Grandview had just gone up against Legend, and it was a fun one. And I don't think you acknowledged me until the next day, which is always, it's always encouraging. But Legend battled back. There was an early deficit, and it was probably the first big test for DJ Bordeaux. So, Jermaine, what did you see just from the poise and the demeanor from Legend and from DJ that they were able to get that done? And should teams be worried about that moving forward?
Yeah, it was a heavyweight fight very early, and a rain delay, right? Delayed. So whenever you get those rain delay games, especially over at Echo Park, we know the history of that from last year's playoff games. Moved to Echo Park. When you get those late games there, the chemistry and the atmosphere amongst the team is very important. What I've seen on Legend's side is they were a little shocked, right? I mean, and Grandview was pumped to be that shocker, right? They wanted to continue to punch and punch. I tell you, the Flores brothers were just in full flare. They were at linebacker and defensive back between Brody and Jackson. They were truly standing up to DJ's, his ball is just swift. I mean, when he throws that ball, he puts it in there as a wideout. You better be ready, or he'll take your hand or your thumb off if you don't get your hands open. But what I'd seen was Legend, put their defense in place to make the big game play. And that was Kellen Brown when he had that interception when they were driving down. I mean, Grandview was driving down, ready to go up 2 scores. And, Kellen Brown, linebacker, drops onto a zone and picks off that slant that they've been living off of for a while. That changed the game. At that point, you can see when you have a quarterback like DJ now can step in and go, all right, we have this 2-minute, 3-minute drill. Let's go down here and score. And that changed the game because they obviously went down there and got a big score and kind of quiet that rush coming from Grandview. But it was a very surprising game for Grandview in regards to all the fans and the people watching, because they weren't slated to be that type of team. As you see, they moved in my top 10. I truly believe the skills that team, the skill guys and the coaching they have on that side, they will be a team that could shock some people throughout the year. And you better keep your head on the swivel when you see that Flores kid come across the middle, because I tell you, DJ took a couple of hits that even DJ could admit, if you had a sound bite in the background, a couple of times, like that was a good one. He stood up one time and pointed it just like that was a good one. Great game to be at on the side. It was great atmosphere there at Echo Park, late game.
Hey, Jermaine, what can you tell us about DJ Bordeaux? I mean, you mentioned the velocity coming out of his hand. He's making plays with his feet. I think he scored the game-winning touchdown, on the ground. And I want to say, and I could be wrong about this, but I want to say at least 5 receivers have caught touchdown passes already this season from him. The name's going to pop up and people are going to start to take interest. What can you say if you had to, give an elevator pitch about DJ Bordeaux this season?
The fellowship. I seen the fellowship on the sideline, the fellowship after the game, hanging around, watching how the conversations with everyone. It wasn't DJ, walking to his limo as a start quarterback and riding off into the Park of Sunset. It was actually the fellowship, him talking to other parents, him talking to other kids and the youth kids that were at the game present. I believe that is truly the elevator pitch. That he is he's a man's man, right? And he doesn't walk with that pump in his chest versus we have a great team. I can overhear him speaking about he loves Kellen Marchand clutch catches because he can put it out there. And when you are a quarterback and you're confident about your arm, you're even more confident when your skill guys can go get it. I mean, we all watch collegiate and pro level. When a quarterback can actually just throw it and understands, let my guy make a play, that's what's important. So truly watching him get hit a couple times on that game-winning touchdown by Kellen Marchand on that slant, he stood in there and he seen Flores coming down that gap, and he stood there and he put the ball out there. So understand he's tough, and he understands he's going to have to be tough in those situations because he will see those blitz coming from different angles, and they won't have a lot of time to get that ball out of his hand. But he is a great quarterback, and I could tell he was a great young man as well afterwards with the fellowship of the crowd.
And it's funny, Jermaine, I bumped into Kellen Marchand on Friday night at I swung by Valor Regis for a few minutes and saw a couple of the Legend players. The one thing that game also did for them, big confidence boost because it was a tough game that they came out on the winning side of. And leave it to you. You were able to catch up with Kellen after the game, and you weren't necessarily worried about the game they just won, but they have another tough one that we'll see how tough next week. But they have Columbine next week. You didn't hesitate to ask Kellen about it, and he gave an answer that we have some video of that really speaks to the mindset of this Legend team.
Columbine's a good challenge, but it's always Columbine. I mean, they're a good organization. We know what we have. We know what they have. We know what we can stop, how we can stop them, and we're just gonna play our game like every day.
Columbine, of course, falling to Thunder Ridge 26 to, I believe it was 26-7, 26-6, right in there, to drop to 0-2. I mentioned Regis Jesuit, another top 10 team who's 0-2. Columbine's losses to Vista Ridge and Thunder Ridge. Regis's loss are to the top two teams in 5A in Valor Christian and Cherry Creek. So who are you more worried about in terms of an 0-2 start, Columbine or Regis Jesuit?
For me, it's got to be Columbine. I mean, their losses, and I'm not trying to knock those two teams, but one's playing in a lower classification, and Thunder Ridge is a team that's kind of in transition. Obviously, Jay Madden's a great coach, but this is kind of, they're not a complete system just yet because he's just been there a year. So, it's one of those things where I think when you see Columbine lose their first two games, and if memory serves, they've got a tough matchup coming up this week. They could be 0-3. And there's probably some issues there, whether that's with the line that's usually their bread and butter, or whether they just may not have the playmakers at the running back position. Either way, I'm more concerned about them. As you mentioned, Regis lost to two teams that in theory they're supposed to lose to. They just happened to play them early on in the season.
Yeah, I agree. I truly believe Columbine's in a position where it starts with the soil, the foundation. If you look at how the youth sports in that area has changed, right? The Jeffco Football League and how they're moved around. A lot of those teams that typically feed into Columbine are now playing everywhere. I mean, there is no alliance any longer when it comes to these youth football leagues. Arapahoe Youth League is not as strong as it used to be. When I say strong, I'm just talking about numbers. And you have that with Columbine this year. You see some of those traditional athletes that you would see, a couple of those skill guys being at Columbine. Well, a couple of them are at Cherry Creek now, right? And you have the Cromwell. That was a Columbine kid, right? His family for the longest time. So, yeah, it's definitely alarming to see how they respond. It's going to be alarming to see how they respond this week. Another tough one, because yes, you're right, Dan. That was truly a booster for Legend, coming out of a tough game, having a tough fight after that state championship game last year up in Fort Collins. So for them to win that tough one, and where they haven't won those games recently over there in Legend area. So it'll be interesting to see that game. And you hit it right, Doug. Regis is just, those are games they're supposed to lose. And I alluded to this in the first week. 50% of those kids are sophomores and not even driving on that team. And they come out in their first 2 weeks. Look who they're playing, 1-2 in the state. So I look at Columbine having a tough week and coming in, but that coach has all the narrative. He has the locker room, poster board conversations everywhere around him.
Brent,
I'll say this, Dan, about Columbine, and they're going to need a giant bulletin board, if they're going to beat Legend. I mean, a little uncharacteristic for Columbine teams. I mean, in that loss to Vista Ridge, 2 fumbles lost, and they give up the kick return TD. And then, Jay Madden, reviving the once proud Thunder Ridge football powerhouse. That's very exciting for Thunder Ridge fans. But like Doug said, I mean, that's early on. And to only score 6 points against them, I mean, that's worrisome. You're going against a Legend defense now that's, I think they forced, 6 turnovers in 2 games. That could be a long night.
Here's where I kind of differ in opinion with you guys, is that even with Vista Ridge is kind of a team that's on its way up and is going to be a very good 4A football team, not just this year, but for the next few years. And you can't discount the experience and the boost that Jay Madden automatically gives Thunder Ridge, right? But Columbine, to some degree, was still competitive in those games. They weren't blowout losses. When I look at Regis and what's going on, I mean, they were down 28-0 to Cherry Creek with 6 minutes left in the first quarter. And it was never really a game. Valor, I think, added a late touchdown, so that score was maybe a little more lopsided than what you need to see. But that's a perennial top 10 team that's always a threat to making deep playoff runs. No one's going to argue that Cherry Creek is the number one team in 5A, and there's probably a significant dip in terms of number one and even number two in Valor Christian. But Regis wasn't competitive in either of those games. They got off to slow starts, and they were just never able to bounce back. And that, to me, is a little more concerning. Andy Lowry has been doing this for so long. That offense is tailored to keep games close and give them a chance to fight at the end. So I think by virtue, they have a chance to bounce back based off style of play and coaching alone. Regis, even though they're young, Jermaine, that team is you're right, full of sophomores. But in terms of the program standpoint, I think for this year, and I'll preface that and weight that with this year, I think there's a little bit more for Regis Jesuit to be concerned about. But we'll see. I mean, that's why we play, right? I mean, Regis's schedule is only going to get easier, and Columbine is they're going to probably figure things out a little bit on their end. Doug, you've mentioned that you don't think they have the size that they've had in years past, but that style of play that they have lends itself to a team that can rebound.
Well, you make a good point. I mean, Columbine has history on its side. They've got tradition on its side. And that's not to say Regis doesn't have a tradition, but I believe the last time that Regis was in a state championship was in the 80s in football. So, Columbine sort of has that mentality of we're supposed to be here. I think Regis is that team that's on the outside looking in going, we need to be joining this club. So it'll be interesting to see how these two teams kind of rebound in week 3, or I guess technically week 2 now. But the Legend Columbine game is definitely one to watch. And I hope it's close. I hope, just for the sake of a great, two programs going head to head early in the season, I hope it's a good game to watch.
One more story, cool story from around 5A. Over Smoky Hill opens up week 1 with a big win over Overland, 56-0 to win the wagon wheel. Smoky was a team that went 0-10 last year, scored 36 points all season. So it's nice to see a good rebound for a team like that. If we look around the rest of the classifications, I mean, TCA, you're defending 2A champions. They were down 10-0 against Eaton in a week 1 clash, a team that a lot of people think is going to rebound and get back into that state championship picture. They scored 34 unanswered points, come away with a big win, and that was enough in the Colorado Preps polls to jump up TCA from the number 2 spot to the number 1 spot. Wellington hasn't played a game yet, so we'll still have to see what's going on there. Dougie, rumors of Lyman's dominance up front may not be exaggerated. Have you talked to Coach O'Dwyer since their win on Friday?
I haven't, but I did check out the box score, and true to form, they ran the ball really well. The Taha kid had, I believe it was 131 yards on the ground and a touchdown. So, they're going to be right there. I still think, if you do talk to Coach O'Dwyer, he'll tell you that they lack speed, or at least lack some of the speed that they've had on their championship teams, but they don't lack size. And that offensive line is big. Kind of going back to what we talked about at the very beginning of the show. You have a dominant offensive line in high school football. You have a chance every single week. And I know that Lyman has athletes. Maybe they don't quite have that top end speed that they've had in the past, but I guarantee that they're not slow in air quotes.
Akron and Sanford are both looking good in 8-man play. Akron will be down in the Colorado Springs area on Friday to take on St. Mary's. So I'm actually going to try and navigate over there and check out some 8-man football. We release new top 10 polls on coloradopreps.com for anyone who wants to check those out. A little bit of movement. I mentioned TCA moving into that number 1 spot in 2A. But, guys, it's going to be another good week. Week 1 was just filled with so many fun matchups. Probably not as many in week 2, but still some games worth checking out. Jermaine, Mountain Vista takes on Erie. Is that Mountain Vista train going to keep on rolling?
Yeah, I see them taking this victory from Arapahoe and just running with it. I mean, it's a battle. Anytime you have a team that has commits and college commits, it's that social battle, right? I speak a lot about that because around these student athletes every day, the bar stools and the podcasts of the world, they play a huge factor in the motivation with student athletes. And this game will be just another one for Mountain Vista to show and prove that the new athletes are here. You look back and just hopping back to that Smoky Hill victory. I'm excited about that because that's where you start to look at where we spoke about Columbine not having a feeder program. You look at Smoky Hill having the Bison Youth Football Organization as their feeder program. That's one of the teams we train at UPSWING. And I actually was supposed to train them this past Friday, but they were invited to be a part of that game because they're the futures, right? They're considered the futures of Smoky Hill. When you have great youth programs starting to feed into these teams, you'll see the difference change. And I think that's what changes Colorado football. And we've had that here recently with teams like Smoky Hill. You see that with teams like the Thunder Ridge getting back to that youth lightning team over there, and used to be a part of Jeffco, and you start the push that goes into it. So, yeah, when I look at this victory, hopefully a victory for Mountain Vista, or they're looking for that victory, they will be motivated. Erie's a team that they know they can put their name down if they get that win over them.
That game will be Thursday night, Ralston Valley, Grandview. Also Thursday, we'll see if Grandview can kind of live up to the profile that they jumped up with by keeping that game with Legend close. We move on to Friday. Brent, Arvada West is going to take on Fairview. Is that how big of a test is that for Kai Ellison?
Yeah, and I think it's key because I think I got in trouble by McCartney.
I think I got in trouble by man. We're the writers.
Yeah, I know.
Right? This podcasting stuff is new for us.
Yeah. McCartney gave me a hard time for that, but I said I'm not for TV, but except now. But I think that kid. He's phenomenal, and kind of tagging along with Jermaine and talking about Mountain Vista. I mean, last year I thought Mountain Vista, at least you could argue, was the best team in the state for most of the year. And I know a lot of people still said Cherry Creek, but Mountain Vista, yes, they had of course, it helps when you have, Colorado's all-time passing TD king at quarterback. But at the same time, that defense was good and all that. And all Fairview did, and this kid, who was a sophomore at the time, he, went in against a Mountain Vista team that nobody gave a shot to Fairview, including me. I didn't think, and I didn't think it'd probably be much of a game, but the kid didn't have probably his best game against Mount Vista. But I don't know if you guys remember that game. It was, the lights went out at one point. They had to move over to Echo. Stadiums. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But this kid, I mean, he made a series of plays in the final minutes and pulled off a stunning win over Mountain Vista. So kid has a lot of moxie. McCartney up at Fairview just loves them. And if anybody knows, good quarterbacks, it's McCartney up there. And he's got, his favorite receiver is going to be Trey Davis, who's committed to UCLA. So I expect him to have a monster year. I think it's key.
Brent, you mentioned Trey Davis, and we had Key in for our photo shoot at UPSWING.
I better be right.
He's kind of an unassuming kid. I mean, he's not that big. He doesn't walk in the room and scream, I'm a big time quarterback. But you're right, he does have that moxie, and he's very confident. I asked him, hey, this is going to be nice. You're coming back in after being the starter as a sophomore. He said, you know what? It's not that hard. I got some great receivers. I just throw it up to them and they make plays. So he does have that swagger, and he does kind of have that kind of quiet confidence. But, you know, we talk about all these teams that run the ball so well and have dominant offensive lines. And then you throw in Fairview, and that's a team that traditionally has been an aerial attack. I mean, Coach McCartney's offenses are always built on that. He's had great quarterbacks historically. You know, you go back to like the Craig Oakses of the world. Fairview can put the ball in the air and rack up yards in a hurry on anybody. But I look forward to this matchup because, you know, we talk about a lot about those kind of 1 through 5 teams. This is an 8-9 matchup this week that could really, you know, help kind of clarify, okay, how does the rest of this top 10 stack out in 5A? There's a lot of movement in the lower half of the top 10. So I think this could help us as voters get a much clearer picture. I don't know about you guys, but I can't wait for the next round of voting when we can start to sort of, you know, make some relative comparisons to who beat who 2 weeks ago, who beat who this week. It's tough to vote. So I think that there will be a lot of movement coming up in the next few weeks in the polls.
And then perhaps the main event for Friday is going to be that Legend Columbine game that we talked about. Doug and Jermaine, either one of you guys, I don't want to say disastrous, how concerning would this be for Columbine if they can't get a win over Legend and that team drops to 0-3 for the first time since the Max Preps era began back in, I think, 2004?
You're kind of like a defense lawyer that then, you know, the judge tells the jury, strike it from the record. You know,
strike it from the record.
You said disastrous. I think it would be disastrous if Columbine goes to 0-3. That said, they're doing so against a really good team. So I think their approach, I would have to think if they were to get into that disastrous territory would be, hey, the only thing we can do is get better from here. I hope they can, you know, sneak in by winning out. They might have to win out to get a good spot in the playoffs. But, you know, Jermaine, you've seen Legend play. It's no shame to lose to Legend. I just think, you know, the main thing for them is facing that Columbine style. Will that throw them off enough to make it a game?
Well, last week, you know, Grandview were very physical. I was impressed with Grandview. The tight ends, I mean, their black set that they had in at times with the double tights was very aggressive. So it was almost like a scout team for the next week, right? Legend were able to see a big team in front of them. You know, I don't look at Columbine saying it'll be another game. I don't look at them saying that if they lose this, we're closing the program, right? It's not a pro team.
I don't think that would happen.
Yeah, we don't have. This is not Dallas, and they're not giving away the Cowboys here or giving away their star players. I think you'll still be able to play at Columbine on Monday if they do go out and get a defeat. We're defeated this Friday. I look at Legend looking at that game as a program statement win, and I mean that because what they can look at is like how they started their season, new coach, new quarterback, new era of a young fiery coach. Atmosphere there in Parker is just, it's a lot of vibes, great vibes about this team. So to bring in a win over Columbine, you're in that conversation where now we're ready for the big boys, and the big boys being we understand this being Valor and Cherry Creek, two teams. I'm saying the big boys to that program because two teams who've put them out in the past, right? Obviously with the state championship last year and years prior to that, you know, Valor was always the team that beat Legend in the playoffs, the semis and the Final Four a couple years back. So it's going to be one of those games where you look to see who's going to actually stand up and swing the best, not the most. I think both teams come out fighting, but it will be one of those you want to be sidelined to hear some of that crackling going on.
Other games I'm keeping my eye out for this week, Roosevelt Holy Family should be a good one. Pueblo West Pomona, and then out west, the battle, Coach Mertens always calls it the Western Slope title. Montrose takes on Palisade. That's the first of a series of Western Slope games that are going to be worth keeping an eye on. But that's pretty much, we try and go an hour in this deal, and we've spent the entire hour talking football, which has just been great. But Jermaine, we're going to let you get out of here. Feel free to stick around number 38, where you're at Mile High Sports headquarters at number 38 right now. Feel free to stick around and grab some food. Let that I-70 traffic kind of calm down before you have to head back. But before you go, tell us what are you excited about? What's going on at Upswing this week?
Our Alpha program on Friday. Very excited to have the youth in to speak and connect to have a conversation. So this Friday we'll have our Alpha series be the kickoff. The first week of it, we have a wonderful Pastor Tom of Eastern Hills Church is going to be our guest there. It's going to be a great conversation for, once again, these student athletes to find out, who they are versus what they are. And if you, even those who aren't athletes, just a place where you can come and feel comfortable and have a conversation with youth. Today's youth are in need of conversations with those who have faith behind them, as well as some maturity of just experienced adults. So many times we are in the youth are in position where those have roles above them, so they must listen versus just having a conversation. And sometimes having the panel sit in the audience, and the audience is the panel. So we're excited to have that conversation and see how we can assist the community and the youth. That is this Friday at UPSWING Centennial. You can find out more about it on our website. You alluded to it, Dan. It's upswingfoundation.org. Come out and see us at 6 o'clock this Friday. It's going to be a great time.
Jermaine, we're excited to talk more football with you in a week.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right, man. Have a solid one. Doug, you mentioned the disaster that could happen if Columbine starts 0-3. You know who's helpful in a disaster? Our friends at Gordon Insurance, an independent agency that keeps the customer in mind. Gordon Insurance offers a wide variety of insurance products, including home, auto, business, workman's comp, farm, and ranch. They have offices throughout the Eastern Plains, can be found in Lyman, Sterling, Kit Carson, Calhoun, and Flagler. Tim Anderson is a dedicated professional who also moonlights as the play-by-play voice of the Lyman Badgers that you've referenced once or twice today. You can hear his call on the NFHS network each game day, and you can learn more about how he and his team can help you fulfill your insurance needs at GordonINS.com. Now, football took up a ton of the show. We always figure that's going to be the case, but there's still so much going on in terms of the high school sports world that's worth checking out. It's a big regular season tournament week for a lot of volleyball programs. Lewis Palmer's hosting the likes of Windsor, Bayfield. Brent, Holy Family will be in Monument, Pueblo West, Centauri, Montrose, Platte Valley. I'll be up there to check that out. Mesa Ridge, D'Evelyn are also hosting tournaments this week. Thompson Valley, the defending 4A champions, lost to a 4A team in Lewis Palmer for the first time since the 2023 state tournament. Is that opening the door a little bit for some 4A volleyball teams to kind of step in and potentially work their way into that state championship deal? And if it's not going to be a Lewis Palmer, who's been a title contender in recent years, or a Palmer Ridge, who's suffered an early season loss, any ideas of who we could be looking at in terms of 4A volleyball, guys?
I'll say this, and like we were saying with football, I mean, it's so tough to really gauge, who's good in volleyball just based off, some of these tournaments where they only go 2 sets. So, I mean, sometimes you're like, well, they beat them in 2 sets, but I don't know. It also, how many games are they, or matches are they playing on a day? So it's tough. But I will say this, at least in my area, the team that has beat a couple of our teams, Meade and Niwot, is the team over in Alamosa. And, last year, they get swept by Meade and Niwot, and both Meade and Niwot are expected to be pretty good this year, and we'll see. I don't know. I mean, they're not on the level of your Lewis Palmers and Thompson Valleys, but they could be state tournament teams. And then you have this Alamosa team that comes and sweeps them both. So hard to tell, but the thing that's just jumped out at me, something's brewing for the old Mean Moose. That's
right. They're tough 3A program. Their only loss so far is to Eaton, who is of course a 3A powerhouse. Doug, if we want to keep looking at the Eastern Plains of volleyball, Marino is still in solid form. They had a tournament win last weekend. They have a new coach, but Marino was of course the Mile High Sports high school rankings champion a couple years ago. Do you see the consistency in a program like this, to where even with a loss to McClave last year, they can bounce back and kind of right that ship?
Well, absolutely. And you're right. That is a program, and it goes across all sports. They've got athletes. They've got athletes in track. They've got athletes in girls basketball. but they haven't lost in this school year yet. So I think that says that is kind of a team on a mission. That's a team that kind of remembers how they fell last year and is keeping it top of mind as they kind of roll through the gauntlet this year.
We move over to softball. I read a cool story at bocopreps.com from Brent New on the Here sisters, Broomfield and Erie, or Ireland and Brayland, but they play for Broomfield and Erie. Brent, what was awesome about this case? I mean, you have sisters playing for rival teams. How does that work? How did they figure out who was going to which school? And what was the feeling after that game was over with? I think it was Broomfield getting the win.
Yeah, it was Broomfield getting the win, but the younger sister may have gotten better of her older sister. It's funny because last year when the two faced off, so you got Ireland here, who is the star pitcher for Broomfield. She's going to Iowa to pitch. She's going to be up in the conversation for 5A Player of the Year, as she was last year. She didn't win it, but she was a 5A first teamer. And then you got this sophomore who goes to Erie because the family moved to the Erie area a little bit over a year ago, and I think she had her choice, but she said, I want to go with Erie and maybe make her own little legacy there. I mean, her sister has carved along with that senior class over there. I think Broomfield's going to end up winning the 5A title. They're just so good and so loaded. But in this game, it's fun because Ireland gets the win. Her ERA is still something ridiculous, something microscopic, like 0.3 or something. But her sister gets 2 hits off her. So I don't know. After younger sister gets a first hit, maybe I'm going high and tight. But she's a better person than me. And the biggest fan of Braylon, is her older sister. All she does is rave about her. So it was all in fun. I don't know if I could have done that against my siblings. I would have been a little more, I don't know, meaner.
Hey, my question is, how in the heck did they both not get gobbled up at Holy Family?
That's true. Yeah. Well, yeah.
They're in the neighborhood. They're in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, Broomfield, I mean, their whole softball trajectory has changed when Cale Gilmore took over that program. Obviously, he's a successful baseball coach, and he was drafted back in the day. He's kind of Broomfield's folk hero over there. But so I don't know. They've just had this freshman class, and they've kind of ran with it with Ireland and here and but I don't know. I'll have to go ask John Yunt, a sports information guy, why they're not getting on these great softball players in the area.
We'll probably have John on the program at some point throughout the season, but I want to go back to something you said, Brent. I have 3 siblings, and I'll tell you first and foremost, I don't care about a team win or loss. I've got to get the better of my siblings. I need to have that trash talk ability. In a couple of weeks, I'm running the Pikes Peak Ascent with my brother, Jeff. Hundreds of people signed up to compete in this race. I only care about the one. I only care that I beat the one guy. That's my only priority. So, Doug, any preference on whether you'd have a win or a one-up on a sibling?
Well, I have a sister that would say, I don't care. I don't want to play. You're an idiot. You win. I'm leaving. That would be mine personal experience. She was not one that wanted to go toe to toe in sports with her older jerk brother. So I can't really tell you. I don't have a brother that I went head to head with. So, but I can see that in your race. I've actually got my money on your brother. Don't tell him, but
yeah,
well,
it's on record as
now.
The youngest of. Oh,
it's on record now, Doug. You said it. You said it on a medium that he can watch. Thanks.
I don't know if he watches the show.
As Brent, you're saying as the youngest?
As the youngest, I definitely would have one up, but that's me just being selfish. I'm sure Ireland would have said she's just happy to get the team win, and I think she was being sincere because they're actually 2 very sweet sisters. But as for me, I would have been like, I don't care. like, I just want to, or, don't show up to dinner. So
I'm
I would have wanted the six.
Going to believe there's a little bit of a competitive edge in her that's irritated by the fact that Braylon went
Probably
to
a little bit.
Probably a little bit. Over to the cross country ranks. We've got a great recap of some of the action over the weekend from Bobby Reyes up on ColoradoPreps.com. Big story was Coronado's Oliver Horton setting the course record at the Arapahoe Warrior Invite. He's the first sub-15 runner of the year at any race. So that's a name to keep an eye on. I mean, he's still got to compete with defending state champion, defending Gatorade Runner of the Year, Aiden LaRue. Doug, Aiden LaRue of Cheyenne Mountain. Doug, you added a note here that he did it without a watch, which was Bobby's lead in the story.
Yeah, and you got a great photo on the homepage of ColoradoPreps.com of basically Oliver Horton doing the shadur, but with no watch. So I thought it was a great kind of moment, and Bobby captured it perfectly in the story. But I was curious, how common is that? I mean, it got me thinking, and someone that was not strong enough mentally to run cross country, how common is it that those kids run without watches or with watches? It brought to my mind, is it legal? How long has it been legal? Do you have to keep track of time in your head? But I love the pictures. It's the shadur, but I don't need it. I don't need a watch.
And that was his point. He knew he had set the record without a watch. Like, he knew that he had run that race faster than anyone else, which is awesome. And what's funny is when I saw your note, the first visual that I have, and Brent, I don't know if you can picture this in your head, but at the start of each race at the state cross country invite, I'm standing by a fire hydrant outside the pavilion at the Norris Penrose Event Center. And when those kids are all getting to the starting lineup, the visual that you get is every single one of them basically getting ready to start their watch, because they all track it via whatever they're doing, whether it's Garmin, whether it's an Apple Watch. I think anyone who's an endurance athlete at this point in life, you're uploading everything you do to Strava. So they're all kind of keeping it. I can't imagine why it would be not legal, Doug. I think, as long as you're competing and you have a race and you're in the race and, you're staying within the course boundary, you're good. I think that's more of a tool that a lot of runners use to try and pace themselves. But it was a great story. I would highly recommend people check out ColoradoPreps.com to see it.
As a former high school cross country runner that made state once only because his team, dragged him there. The good runners will wear the watches. For me, or something like at that beginning of the state race that I got to once as a senior, I would sprint out because that was my moment, and I would try to get in that lead pack, and then I would end up dying, and all the kids with the watches and knowing how to pace and smart kids. But that's really cool with the Coronado kid. Anytime a cross country runner can have some swagger, that's a win in my book. So good for that kid.
And you mentioned the photo, Doug. Props to our friend Jen Jardaliza. She's one of the great photographers that uploads to our photo store, which you can find at photos.coloradopreps.com. We move over to boys golf. We are getting closer and closer to the end of the regular season for boys golf. Doug, you got an interesting text message from a friend of yours who had a question about qualifying. If you want to rat out the name, I'll let you, but I'm not going to do that. But what was the sense that you were getting from someone outside the high school golf ranks, just in terms of trying to get qualification verified?
Well, I think context is everything. So this particular friend happens to be a very prominent, very good golf coach in the state and coaches kids all over the state. So I preface that by saying there's no real dog in the fight other than he's got a lot of kids that are very good golfers all over the state. And one particular program, at least from what I gathered, had somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 golfers that had kind of qualifying scores in the rankings. And I may not be saying that correctly, but he asks, okay, they're all in one program. How many of them get a go? And I wisely deferred to you to kind of clarify how the new system is. So I will turn it over to you again. But I do think it's interesting because the system has changed and it's not clear to everybody, or at least that would be my perception.
So with regionals eliminated. The field is being chosen by the I Want to Maker rankings, which can be found at I Want to Maker's website. Schools are limited to 4 players for the state tournaments. And so the big question that I had coming out of this, because I didn't want to talk a whole lot of golf this week, Doug, but then this sent me down a rabbit hole, is that if you're a team like Brent, let's use Holy Family, who's got 7 players right now inside of the top 84. Well, only 4 get to go. So you're going to boot out 3. Is that on the I Want to Maker rankings to boot out the 3? Or if you're a coach, do you get to say, of my 7 qualifiers, here are the 4 that are going? And what I was told from CHSAA Assistant Commissioner Mike Book was that I Want to Maker automatically takes the top 4 kids, boots out the others. I can very much verify there are athletic directors and coaches who are not happy with that they would like the opportunity to be able to pick from the kids that they've qualified. So we'll see how everything plays out. I think as is, it's going to be the top 4 from each school. That may change at the end of the year. I think a golf committee meeting is maybe a week or so after the state tournament. So that's something that's going to be discussed. But
well, Dan, what do you think of that? I mean, you're saying athletic directors are upset, but I mean, because it's based off 5 rounds, is my understanding, that your best.
Yep, you have to have 5 qualifying rounds.
And so if a kid has his best 5 rounds is better than some other kids, I guess my thing would be, well, he deserves to be on the state team. Why does the coach get to play chess?
Golf is a finicky game, Brent. So an example that I was given was, what if your number 4 had actually been trending backwards in his last 2 or 3 tournaments, and your number 5 had actually trended upwards and was gaining in the rankings? Do you want to take the hot hand if you're a coach? Which I think is a fair question.
I think it's a fair point. I think the other thing that this system may not take into account could be injury, which isn't as prominent in golf, but it does happen. I mean, Tiger Woods would tell you it happens. You might have a kid who's coming off an injury and maybe not playing his best at the beginning, but playing his best at the end, and maybe their scores don't match up. But I will say this: there's no perfect system for, including your number 4 versus number 5, really in any sport. I would make this comparison. Do you think that there's kids at Cherry Creek Tennis that couldn't start for 85% of the programs across the state who aren't lettermen at Cherry Creek? 100% that's the case. So I just don't know that you can say, well, this program has 8 great golfers, so they're all in. And this program has 2, obviously they're in. It's not fair to the kids that are, south. There's no perfect system, but there are great programs. And, if you're playing a great program, you got to be great. And I think that's kind of one of is it fair? No, but neither is anything else. And I think that's where, the beauty of high school sports and competition is that you might have a really good year and you might learn that, hey, you don't get a go because there's still 4 kids that are better than you. And that might be unfortunate at some schools, but I think that's probably a rare case.
And in a couple weeks, the week before the boys golf state tournaments, we will preview those tournaments. And I think this discussion will have a little bit more weight as we get into that. But it's something to keep an eye on. I know there's a lot of discussion going into what could happen. I imagine that they'll stick with what they have for this year and then evaluate, make changes if necessary next year. So flag football, maybe the game of the weekend was defending 5A champion Mountain Vista. They got a 32-0 win over Cherry Creek. Doug, does this put the Golden Eagles officially on repeat watch?
Oh, I think it has to. I mean, you returned Ariana Akey, the last year's MVP stud quarterback, and in her encore, she goes out and beats one of the best teams in 5A, and they blank them. I don't think that's easy to do. I don't think many other teams are going to do that against Cherry Creek. But I did catch the highlights of that game on Channel 9 this last weekend. And Ariana Aki is just fun to watch. I mean, she is an athlete. She puts the ball in the dime. She makes plays out of the pocket. That's one that if anybody gets a chance to go watch, she's a player to go see. No doubt about that.
All right. I think that's going to do it for our trip around the fall sports of the state. As we started this last week, and this is how we're going to end every show, but we do have some performance shout outs. We might end up calling them letter winners at some point, I think, Dougie, but lead us off. What caught your eye just in terms of a statewide performance this week that got your attention?
Well, I've got Obi Clark from Telluride. You brought this one to my attention, and then I started looking into it. 6 goals in 3 games, and his team's 2-1. The one lost being to Denver Christian 3-2. But for someone who played varsity soccer, I don't know that I had 6 goals in my entire 2 years of lettering. So to do it in this few of a number of games, that's worth a shout out. I mean, it's just not an easy. It's not an easy sport to be consistently scoring. And what Obi Clark's done in his first 3 games is pretty impressive. Shout out Obi Clark. And
Telluride has been in that 2A state title picture for the last couple of years. Brent, I know that's one for us over at ColoradoPreps.com. You've had to write their name very frequently in the last couple of years when you do your boys soccer write-ups. I'm going to shift back to the Boco area. Julia Savage from Fairview softball. Brent, she has 2 multi-home run games, and she leads the state with 6 total so far. Are we looking at a power hitter that can keep up with maybe the likes of Kendall Ferguson at Valor?
Oh, definitely. And I'm actually going to watch Julia this afternoon as she goes against Horizon. I mean, she was a club softball player her first 2 years in high school, and they finally convinced her to come out. And, she had 15 home runs last year, and that obviously that Valor girl, and that was just something else, she finished with 21, but
yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But Julia, I mean, Fairview's not, they're a program that's, trying to build up, and, they're probably not going to be a state tournament team, but if people have the chance, I mean, she's just fun to watch. I mean, she hits just with power, and some teams even try to give her the Barry Bonds treatment, and but the second that they pitch to her, it's just power you don't see at this level very often.
Building a program always helps when you have a power hitter like that, though. So hopefully this can lead to good things for the Knights. I'll wrap it up as we head down to Swink. Boys golf, Noah Pearson beat Monte Vista's Connor Mellett by 1 shot at the Swink Golf Classic. He's got 6 rounds under his belt. He's pretty much a lock for the state tournament at this point. The 2A state tournament will take place at Elmwood Golf Course down in Pueblo. And that about wraps it up for us. I mean, guys, we're hitting this stretch of sports, not just in high school, but in everything that is going to keep us all busy. Brent, what's on tap for you? You're starting your regular content at ColoradoPreps.com, and what's on the calendar coming up this week for Boco?
Like I said, getting to see Savage tomorrow, that's really exciting. And then, this weekend, really excited to kind of see how some of those football matches play out. We were mentioning Fairview. That's always a high scoring game with Arvada West. I think Fairview is, again, they're an echelon probably below. Everyone's an echelon below Cherry Creek, which is just, that's the way it is a lot of years. But I'm curious to see. They lost a few guys on both sides of the ball, but Key, I better be right about that. Key Ellison is just so fun to watch. Small, kind of a small stature quarterback, but big arm, puts it on place. I'm so excited, to see what he does against Arvada West, and then also to see, Erie. That's a tough matchup. we'll see. But I would like to see how a Geiger team responds against, a really good Mountain Vista team.
Doug, it's Broncos season. What's going on with Mile High Sports?
Well, as you mentioned at the top of the show, we just came out with our new magazine. It looks like a Broncos preview, but it's really a football preview all around. So we've got a college preview, we've got a high school preview, and I will take this time, Dan, to say great job on the UPSWING profiles. I believe we finished with 18 kids with the help of Jermaine. You and Jermaine put that list together. I can tell you that on this show, I think we've hit on at least half of the kids on the list in terms of guys that have had big performances already, guys that have kind of lived up to their billing. I mean, it's going to be cool to open up that magazine and see themselves on the pages. I know mom and dad and grandma and grandpa will be excited about that, but it really is a great preview to the high school sports, high school football season, I should say. And then, yeah, we definitely we hit on the Broncos. Everybody on the staff, myself, yourself, Sean Drotar, Cody Rourke, Nate Lundy, everybody kind of weighs in on the Broncos. We've got some, some fun discussions, some debates. But yeah, we got the Broncos coming up this weekend, and we'll see which one of us is right, I guess.
And then, it should be fun. Some of those roundtables previews might make their way to milehighsports.com later this week. So be sure to tune in and check those out. And then I'm just doing the normal preps thing like Brent. I'll be at fields and gyms and stadiums all weekend. I'm curious to see what Akron football looks like. They're in my neck of the woods, so I want to make a point to see the Rams a little bit. But just another week of high school sports as we head into week 2 of football, and as we get closer and closer, Brent, I'm thinking soon we might start seeing early selection and seeding index rankings for some sports like flag football, softball, maybe soccer. So that does it for us. Brent, can't thank you enough for jumping on. We're excited to have you back when we talk BOCO in to the depth that we did today.
I vote we bring Brent back a lot.
You vote we bring Brent back a lot. All right.
Hey, Doug, how do I get back in that magazine? How do I get back in there?
I think we can work something out. You come on the show a little bit, we'll get you back in the magazine. I like it.
Good.
All right. For our EP, Danny Bailey, superstar behind the scenes. Thanks so much for everything you do. For Doug Ottewill, for Brent New, BocoPreps.com. I'm Dan Mohrmann, and let's have another great week of high school sports.
Absolutely.